Welcome, everyone, to another author interview. As always, I'm your host, Christopher Paolini, and today I'm going to be talking with none other than the awesome Bruce Coville.
Hey, gang.
Bruce, I've actually been really looking forward to this interview because, well, for a bunch of reasons, but the main one, and I'm guessing you already know this, is because you actually wrote a book a number of years ago called Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher. And as our audience may or may not know, it was that book that pretty much specifically is what got me to write Aragon back in the day. And in fact, I have to show you this. I have in my office, I don't know how well it'll show up on Skype, I have
That
this print from Tony Dieterlizzi, which was done, of course, for one of the new editions of Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher.
I didn't expect to see that coming, and I love that cover. Tony's a genius, and that's just that piece of work captures the book so beautifully, I think. And you have always been very generous about giving the book credit for inspiring you.
I think I read it when I was 13 or 14, and it was just this. You did such a great job of capturing the feel of a young boy finding this dragon egg, and the relationship between the boy and the dragon, and that appealed to me so much that it got me thinking about other stories, and of course I sort of took it off in my own.
It appealed to you so much you wrote three giant books.
Four.
Four giant books.
It was a trilogy in 4 parts.
I think I've written three four-part trilogies too, so I understand. They just keep going somehow.
But of course, you've written a lot more than just Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher. I think you mentioned to me last time we spoke that you have published something close to 100 novels, over 100 novels.
Well, let's not say 100 novels because that includes picture books, anthologies, early readers. So the number of, I'd have to separate out count of the number of novels that are in it, but it's over 100 books, yes.
It's still, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, I'm old and hyperactive, so.
Well, and full disclosure, I just read one of your more recent books, which now I'm not sure what title to give it. Do you want to tell the story about that?
Sure. The original title, and it was published under this title, was The Diary of a Mad Brownie with Important Documents. And I loved it. I thought it was a very funny title. And the editor loved it and thought it was a very funny title. Pretty much everybody in promotions and publicity at the publishing house loved it. It was a really bad title choice because the book tanked, and we've been trying to figure out why. Because we got great reviews, and every kid who's read it has loved it. I mean, I get these wonderful letters about it. But first, it was a riff on a 1960s movie title that nobody remembered. Second, although as adults we find Diary of a Mad Brownie, the sense of slightly eccentric or highly eccentric, funny, kids didn't really know that meaning of mad that well. Just sounded like an angry brownie. And since a lot of kids didn't know what a brownie was, it sounded like a pastry that was having a hissy fit. Actually, there's a multitude of things I'm grateful to Random House for in this. First, they've been so supportive and on how to make this series work. They didn't dump it when we had problems with the first one. They said, let's rethink it and make this work. So we've gone entirely for the paperback edition and for the rest of the series, we've gone from that long and cumbersome title format. Next was going to be The Diary of a Runaway Griffin, and then The Diary of a Terrible Troll to Cursed, Hatched, and Trolled. Simplicity itself. I hope it works.
And when will that be coming out under that title?
Sometime this fall.
Well, now I did read. I guess we'll call it Cursed, since that's the new title of the book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, I don't read a lot of YA fiction nowadays because I'm not a kid anymore, and I've read so much. And something that bothers me with a lot of it these days is that there's a tendency toward, I think, grimness, and not just grimness, but a sense of defeat in some ways, and just these really intense, hard topics that sometimes are not a lot of fun to read about, and sometimes are not dealt with in a very good way. And I read Cursed, and it was just, I thought you had a really well-structured story. I loved the character. The writing was funny and light, and just, I remember I went to I gave it to my mom after I finished reading it, and I said, this is what a children's book is supposed to, this is what a young adult book is supposed to be.
Well, that delights me. I will confess I had a great deal of fun writing that particular book. Angus Cairns' Mad Scottish Brownie is just so much fun to write because he has that pepper pot temper, but he's such a good little fellow at heart. Um, and I laughed out loud. One of my favorite things is when I make myself laugh out loud when I'm writing. Kids say, "Do you like to write?" And I say, "Well, there are days when I feel like my brain has turned to oatmeal, and the only thing that will come out of the keyboard is if I plant geraniums in it. There are other days when I write something that's so fabulous, I stand up and scream and hug myself because I can't stand how wonderful I am." This is true, by the way. Um, the thing is, you have to live through the oatmeal days, of which there are many more, to get to the scream and hug yourself days.
So, how did you get into writing in the first place? I mean, what drew you to it? How did you get started?
First time I thought I would like to write, I was in sixth grade. I might have known earlier, but they didn't have us write that much back in those dark, benighted days. And the only way you learn to write is by doing it. My sixth grade teacher had us write all year long, and I failed at it all year long. I failed because we always had to write her stuff to her prompts, which I wasn't very good at. And I can still remember the stuff that I failed at. This we are hardwired as human beings, as mammals, to remember pain in order to not repeat it, which is a very good survival tactic. As a little kid, you touch the hot iron and it burns and you cry, but you don't touch the hot iron again. The problem is our serpent brain, our lizard brains, don't distinguish between physical pain and psychological pain. So we tend to also not to want to repeat things that gave us psychic or psychological pain.
Like editing.
Yes, but it means that doors shut down in kids. Kids come into kindergarten willing to try and do anything, and every time they get that look from the teacher, every time their classmates laugh at them, every time somebody says, "Oh, don't do that. Don't think that way. You shouldn't think that way." Doors close inside, and people who work with kids need to help them keep kicking those doors back open. But it's why I can tell you now, 50-some years later, the mistakes I made in that class. It's why virtually every writer I know, you can tell me if you're the same case of this. Maybe you never got them, but most writers I know can quote their bad reviews, but not their good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they burn their way into your psyche. So Mrs. Crandall had us write. I remember this vividly. Once you're supposed to write to music, how the music make us feel. And she played Finlandia. I can still remember the piece. And the other kids wrote great stuff. She read them out loud. One kid wrote, "The music makes me feel like a king marching his army up the hill." And another kid wrote, "The music makes me feel like an eagle soaring over the countryside." And she got to mine and said, "Well, the music's getting louder. It's kind of slowing down now." It's going a little faster. It was like, I was like the poster child for OCD. Still am, for that matter. And at that time, she put two topics on the board: rage and my thumb. That was to give us a choice. I was trying to be creative, often a mistake in sixth grade. And so I knew that rage means a great anger, but I was sophisticated enough in my language to know that it also means something that's suddenly very popular. It's news now, it's hot, it's hip, it's here, it's us. So I thought, what becomes popular? Well, music does. I love music, but didn't know enough about it to write about it. Food, well, food is my favorite thing. And I'd already started cooking at that point. So, when you're a kid, you have delusions of grandeur as opposed to when we grew up and have delusions of competence. And I thought I could invent a recipe that could become a fad. I couldn't go home and try anything out. It was a classroom assignment. So I made up a recipe for fruit salad, called it Rage, and handed it. And the woman was baffled. She said, I don't know what she thought I'd done. She said, "You didn't get to try the other one, my thumb." Now, I was too dumb to know that my thumb is a nonfiction topic. This was supposed to be an essay. Everybody else was writing an essay about what the thumb looked like, how they used it. They couldn't live without it. It was like a bunch of little Rembrandts going, thumb. I wrote an adventure story. This thumb got lost. This thumb went looking for it. In which you can see the roots of my future career. She thought I was too weird till seventh grade, but here's my entire career in a nutshell. This thumb got lost. But at the end of the year, she did something really wonderful. She said, "We're going to write a short story." She didn't say a thing about what it had to be about. But she gave us an extended period of time. It was a matter of weeks, I believe, to write it and let us know they'd all be read aloud in class. So we had an audience. And there was a reason to write well, because you had people going to hear it. But we had freedom to write what was inside. And every kid in the class wrote a good story. And I wrote a good story. But that was the first time I thought, I want to be a writer. I think I could do this. I'd like to do this. And by the time I was 16 or 17, I was pretty set on it. I was going to write comic books, was what I really wanted to do. But when I was 19, I was going out with a woman who was now my wife. She is a fabulous artist. And her mother gave me a copy of Winnie the Pooh to read. Now, I'd not read Pooh when I was a kid because it made no sense to me. I take my fantasy very seriously, as you probably know. So Alice in Wonderland makes sense to me. She falls through the rabbit hole. She's in Wonderland. Got no problem with that. Narnia. You go through the wardrobe, you're in Narnia. Makes perfect sense to me. You had to get there somehow. In Winnie the Pooh, Christopher Robin's in his house. Then he's dragging the bear down the stairs. Then he's in the Hundred Acre Wood. And he didn't get there anyway. And I thought it was stupid when I was 9. When I was 19 and read it again, I was old enough to get the wit and the humor and the playfulness of it. And also the fact that that book is designed in a way that books aren't for the most part anymore. We're getting back to it some, but there's an almost cinematic flow between the text and the art in that. It's wonderful E.H. Shepard illustrations. And they work together to make, each lifts the other up to something at a higher level. And I said to Kathy, we can do that. Let's try to do that. Let's try to make kids' books. I'd been interested in kids' books before. I'd always known that I had an interest in kids. I used to babysit a lot, and when I was a freshman in college, and had quite radical politics, and read one of the books of Maria Montessori, who was an educational reformer.
My mom is a trained Montessori teacher.
There you go. Well, Montessori is literally part of why I do what I do, because I thought the way I can have the most profound impact on the world, in terms of trying to make things better, is to work with kids. And from the time I was 18, I knew that and wanted to follow that in some way. So that's how I was a kids book writer.
Well, and I think, I mean, you have even more of a perspective on this than I do, but I mean, given what I've seen of sort of the adult side of the publishing world versus the children's young adult side of the publishing world, I think there's a huge difference in attitude in the people who work in those two different areas. You know, all the editors, all the publicists who work on the children's side. I mean, if they weren't working in publishing, they're the sorts of people who'd be children's librarians, or they'd be teachers. And there's a sense of really wanting to do something for the children that you don't get. There isn't that sense of doing something for a higher purpose, I think, on the adult side of things, unless the higher purpose is writing the great American novel.
Yeah, and I agree with you on all aspects of that. There's a commitment to excellence in children's books that and this sounds awful, but I'll tell you why I say it. That is more widespread than adult work. I did, as I mentioned, I've done 16 anthologies, and one of the things that I tried to do was invite in adult writers who I thought had the right perspective to write for kids, to be part of these middle grade or young adult anthologies. And almost always, I heard from them that they had never been edited so closely. And most of them really appreciated it and really loved it. A few got their backs up because they weren't used to being asked to revise that much. But most of them thought, wow, I love this. I love the chance to make it better and this input and the chance to really try to improve the story in such deep ways.
Do you think that the difference comes from the fact that children, sort of like the basic nature of children is curiosity, and the fact that children are trying to understand the world around them and figure out the underlying logic of things? And so stories for children, like your complaint about Winnie the Pooh, really need to be built like puzzle boxes. They really need to have a solid foundation, even if it's the most fantastical ideas and concepts, because if you don't, the children are going to look at that and say, well, yes, but, or why doesn't this, and I think that that's something that you don't get in adult storytelling quite as much.
Yes, and related to that is that kids won't put up with a lot of blather for the sake of blather. It's really easy for them to put the book down unless it's being assigned. And kids are smarter than adults in that they won't read a book just so they can talk about it at a cocktail party. It's got to be interesting or they're going to put it away.
So given that you've written so many different books at this point, and you've had this experience, and the reason that you started writing has stayed with you so strongly, I'm kind of curious, do you find that you return to similar themes throughout your books, or is there one theme in particular that you find always crops up in your stories, no matter how obscured or hidden? Or
there are a few things that I know come up repeatedly, and sometimes you don't know what your basic theme is, the thing that comes up You can't know until you've been writing for a while and you suddenly realize, oh, I do this over and over and over again in different forms and formats in varied ways. But for me, it's reconciliation. It's the bringing together two things that have been separated. And I find over and over I'm working on this thematic material. It's bridge making. It's peacemaking of a sort, and trying to find a bridge between things that have been separated. Oh, well, just the other thing that I know comes up over and over again is walking the line between of being truthful, but also doing what you need to do. And I was I was actually compulsively truthful as a kid because I got caught lying very young, and bright kids learn quickly. So I got punished, and I learned. Okay, I can't tell lies, and I literally could not tell lies for years and years after that. So I've had two characters: one who was a compulsive liar in Skull of Truth, and one who was a compulsive truth teller, Rod Albright, in the Aliens Ate My Homework stories. Um, Grappling with this thing of this gray area between how do I navigate the world and try to be truthful, but also try not to offend people or try not to get in too much trouble or do what I need to do, when my parents don't know that I have to go out and take care of the dragon. So that's a thing that I'm always working on too. But the underlying thing over and over again is reconciliation.
For someone who's starting out, the young teenager or even younger a person who wants to be a writer, who is looking at all this and is thinking, boy, how do I even get started? What would you recommend? What's your advice for someone starting out?
Oh, well, the first is to read incessantly. Um, and the second is to keep a journal. And the third is to heed the advice of Winston Churchill, who said to the British people during World War II, never give up. I give up. Never, never, never give up. It took me 8 years to get published. I have always advised my students, if I'm teaching adult writers about writing for kids, I give them some off the wall advice. And one is to take acting lessons, acting classes, because it gives you skills, not only skills that you can apply to your writing, because acting, the essence of acting is learning to inhabit a character, to create a character, and the tools you learn in acting you can apply to your writing, but it also gives you tools to be comfortable on the stage talking to people, and storytelling classes as well. But also to take singing classes so that you can learn how to use your voice without destroying it when you're on the road talking to kids and they give you a bad microphone in an auditorium with 300 kids.
How many pages do you tend to do in a day?
That really depends largely on where I am in the book. And I used to write for packages where I would be given uh, sometimes 60 days to write a novel of 40, 50,000 words. And again, being OCD, I would make myself a chart. I have 60 days to write 45,000 words. I have to do this many words per day, which is this many pages. I'd put it on, I'd draw lines on my paper and say, this is March 1, March 2, March 3, pages due, pages actually written, how far I'm behind. And so I could go back to these and share, but what I discovered was that the first day I might write a page. Now I'm already 3 pages behind on this chart. But as I got to the end, it would begin to pick up the pace. The more I knew about the book, the faster I wrote. And a lot of the book would be written in the subconscious mind. So I think the most extraordinary example of that was a book. It was one of the books of the AI Gang series, a package series I did. And I needed 180 pages. And I spent 2 months doing it, maybe 2.5 months. But I wrote 45 pages the last day.
Wow.
Because it just all was there and came exploding out, and I caught it, and the characters clear in my mind. So there is this. It's very much, the cliche image, but it's true of the snowball rolling down the hill, picking speed and growing faster and faster as it goes farther on.
Do you find the pages you write faster need more editing, or is it about the same from start to finish?
No, they need less editing. That's the extraordinary thing about it. No, because everything's come together at that point. I know the characters. I'm in the heat. I'm in the fire of it, and it's just pouring out at that point. I get nervous if I don't have a point where it comes pouring out toward the end. If I get stuck at the end, because there's supposed to be this magic moment when my subconscious says, "Here it is. I've been cooking it up for you," and if that doesn't happen, I really panic. But I have to wait for it to happen, and when it happens, it's wonderful.
Well, I think that, in fact, my recent project that I'm in rewrites and edits on at the moment has proven this to me as well. Once again, I really think that if you as the writer are basically miserable and unhappy the whole time you're writing, as if you feel like you're fighting the material, guess what? You're fighting the material. There's probably a reason that you're having so much difficulty writing something. And it might be you don't understand the characters, or the choices they're making don't make sense for who the characters are, or the world building isn't solid enough. If it doesn't, like you said, if it doesn't come together and click at some point, there's some deeper problem.
Absolutely.
And it's paradoxical, because I've had, the reason I asked you the first time is, in the first case, is I've had the same thing happen where I've had my editor tell me, the sections I wrote the fastest were the best.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Which is horrible, because, as a writer, you'd like to think that the more time you put in on something, the better it's going to be. But sometimes no, sometimes not at all.
Yeah, because you're still flogging at that point. It's when that's smooth. There's that thing about flow. I don't know if you know this, the flow state, being really in it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's coming so fast, it's because you're in that flow state where the subconscious mind and the mind and the conscious mind are not thinking about the world. It's just rising out of you. And those are the days we live for as writers. Those are the scream and hug yourself days.
But yeah, I think you do need to you need to build the structure that allows the flow to happen.
Absolutely.
You want the path to be as smooth as possible, so that you can just let all the words come out of you without having to suddenly stop and think, wait a minute, why are they traveling to such and such a place? Or what has gotten easier with all the books you've written, and what has gotten harder or is still hard after all this time?
Wow, what's gotten easier? Has anything gotten easier? No, I find it, and there's a good reason why it gets harder, which is you're always trying to improve your craft and do better than you did before. Now, it's not an unbroken march to glory. There's times you want each book to be better than the previous one, but that's not going to happen. But you set the bar higher for yourself at all times. So I think one of the things that makes it constantly harder is your own internal desire to do better at all times. What is there? Is anything easier? Jeepers. I think maybe dialogue has gotten. Yeah, I think dialogue has gotten easier for me. Just getting people together and letting them talk and having fun doing that. That happens, once you get the scene set up. It's structure that's always the issue. Once you get structure and how the story is going to be shaped and where it's going, that's to me the thing I still struggle with most. And you want to have that corker of an ending. So yeah, I think the thing that's gotten easier is possibly if anything gets easier, is dialogue.
And no desires to write deep, dark, gritty adult dramas that leave everyone depressed when they finish them.
Why in the world do you want to do that? Hey, I did write one adult book to prove I could do it. It was when I was working for Packagers, and Byron Price was doing these named series. This was Philip Jose Farmers. Phil was a very big science fiction writer, and he'd done Byron, the Packager, had done Isaac Asimov's Robot City, and he would get a big name guy to put together or put his name on the outline for a series. And I'd done a number of kids' books for Byron, and I was having lunch with him, and he said, "You want to write for this one?" And he slid a card across the table with a number on it, which was nice because it was going to be a much longer book. I thought, well, yeah, it'd be fun. I'd like to see if I can do this. So I did it. I thought I did a good job. I liked writing it. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I don't need to do it again. I write for kids.
And it's nice to know what you like doing. That's the other thing. I find there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that I found something that I enjoy doing, and then I think I'm pretty good at.
Yes. Oh, no, that's, Katharine Hepburn said that the secret to happiness is meaningful work that you love. And if you write for kids, it is almost by definition meaningful work, because it does affect them. It feeds their hearts when you do it properly. What I did this morning was go out to a school. It was somebody I taught, a teacher who had been a fourth grade class that I taught, who's now teaching special needs kids. And she'd read him my book, Goblins in the Castle, this one boy, Goblins in the Castle. He's 12. It's the first book he's ever enjoyed. He was at a kindergarten, he's 12 years old, was at a kindergarten reading level 2 months ago, and now he's at a second grade reading level and is pursuing books because the book spoke to him. And when you get letters, and I'm sure you probably get these too, from people who are now adults and saying, I took refuge in your books when I was a kid. They were how I escaped from the bad stuff around me. You're providing a service to kids, and it's meaningful work. If you love doing it, it is meaningful work that you love. It is the definition of happiness.
Well, and hey, the very fact that I'm talking with you today is because of a book that you wrote. I mean, I'm sure that must be a little surreal for you as well.
It is, but it makes me happy.
I know. To me, it's the most rewarding thing is are those sorts of letters, and then just hearing from people in general who have been touched by things I've written, and I mean, that's the most you can hope for as an author. I don't. Awards are nice, but they're meaningless. Book sales are certainly nice because they put food on the table, but hearing from people whose lives have been changed by your writing, that is the ultimate goal. Because otherwise, why write? I mean, you write to communicate. You write to communicate ideas and emotions and concepts and images. And if you can't communicate and touch someone, go do something else. Go do something else that's easier.
Yeah, because there's no point in working this hard if you're not having a good time and having some effect in the world. Yeah, it's a blessing of the work.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to leave this on. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
It was great fun. Thank you for letting me yammer on at such length.
Well, I love doing this because I always feel like I learned something about the art of writing and the craft of writing. There are so many different ways to do it. I certainly don't have a lock on all the great answers on writing. I don't think anyone does.
I'm still learning, so really seriously, it's depressing in a way. I think after 100 books, you think I know what I'm doing, and every time I start again, it's like, what do I do this time? You always have to reinvent it.
Thank you all, everyone, for watching us, and make sure to check out Bruce's books and his website and all of his contact info down below.